People who work for the super rich, what things have you seen? The company I work for sold a jet to an obscenely wealthy dude. I took him to the factory for the mandatory tour. Dude looks at a small prop and says in the most nonchalant way, "Send me a bill for that one too. My daughter may like it." Fast forward 1 year, and his jet is about to be delivered. The factory announces the release of a new, bigger jet. Dude picks up the new jet, attends a presentation for the new model that was coming out in 2 years, and again, in the most nonchalant way, says, "Nice upgrade. Send me the bill for that one, too." He didn't even have 1 hour of flight in the plane he just bought. My uncle is a ship carpenter. He was making a custom luxury yacht and asked the client what type of mast he wanted and what material. The guy couldn't decide, so he put him up in a first-class hotel in Monaco, all expenses paid, until he could make up his mind. For 3 weeks, my uncle stayed in Monaco with nothing to do, waiting by the phone for this client to decide. My aunt was pissed he was away for so long, so my uncle told the client he needs to go home as his wife was going to kill him. Client then pays for my aunt to come over for 2 weeks to join my uncle. It took another 2 weeks for the client to finally decide. For almost 2 months, my uncle stayed in Monaco, all expenses paid with 2 months of overtime pay, plus tip. I work on a yacht and I've seen so much crazy stuff. I'll just list some of them. The boss's wife demanded to be brought aboard in a sedan chair as a mark of respect. The boss is too rich to adjust the temperature in his own shower. Instead, he yells, "Warmer!" or "Colder!" to some poor deckhand standing by with a rolled towel and bottle of shampoo. The boss and his daughter were not able to agree on where to take the boat for their holiday, and his solution to this was to buy her a 55-meter yacht of her own. Every family member brings at least 30 suitcases for a 3-day trip. One time, the boss spent over $2 million in fuel and expenses to bring his entire fleet halfway around the world, just to have the boat sit in front of a hotel while the boss had a party there. He rented an entire 5-star resort for his younger daughter's 6th birthday party. The boss and his multiple gay lovers have an orgy in the hot tub while being served drinks and canapes by the crew. The boss paid to have a private jet fly from their home to pick up one small dog and then have the jet proceed to the local airport to wait in a hangar. The list goes on. I worked for a Russian oligarch as a music teacher, and somehow the job evolved into me playing with their kids whenever they wanted to do fun things. One time, I got flown out to an island near Italy to be their director of fun while they spent the summer in their holiday home there. The most I could do was 3 weeks, but they wanted me for longer. The whole place was run by staff. There were staff quarters where I could eat any time. I was put up in the local town in an apartment and given a number to contact when I needed a ride to their property, which consisted of about 8 villas. The kids shared a few between them. One villa was filled with top-quality instruments, which I had at my disposal during music lessons. The biggest and best villa was for the boss and his wife. They have their own private beach. Most of the day, I was free to explore and enjoy the island. I worked on a loose schedule that could change on a whim. Once a week, there was a big group sports event like a 5-a-side football match or table tennis tournament. I ended up in the final match in a table tennis tournament against the man himself. He's the stereotypical, large, older Russian man worth God knows how much. It felt wrong to just let him win despite the pressure to please him, so I gave it my all, and thank God he won fairly by 1 point. I did some IT work for a banker on his luxury yacht. The bridge of the ship had compartments to store weapons, including fully automatic assault rifles and rocket launchers. All the staff and family had yearly weapons training as the ship maneuvered through pirate-infested waters of Asia regularly. The family was trained in self-defense with a focus on kidnapping extraction. This isn't your usual martial arts. They're trained specifically to defend themselves if kidnapped and to incapacitate people who would try to kidnap them. If it's a more coordinated kidnapping, they're trained on how to behave and use specific keywords to describe the kidnappers and the size of their operation for law enforcement. I should note they were an amazing family. Just the nicest and most wholesome Italian family living in America. I'm a goldsmith and I used to service jewels for the Polid family. They would never come themselves, but send a servant of sorts who would drop off a suede roll of millions of dollars in jewelry. I would assess and secure every gem and clean and polish it to factory new. Many clients come to the store manic or high on cocaine to purchase or order custom pieces. As the custom specialist, Many times I needed to make best friends with folks on a perpetual cocaine bender that never ended. Some needed questions answered at 3 a.m. about their string of Mikimoto pearls. Most very wealthy people are laid back about their jewels because they have so many that it's not of consequence that the watchmaker needs 6 months with their Rolex. After all, they have 6 more. The less money a client has, the worse they are to work with, because you are likely working with their only jewel, and they are protective of it and can't live without it. I was essentially a paid boyfriend in my mid-20s. Technically, I worked as a housekeeper for a divorcee 17 years my senior. My responsibilities were to take care of her laundry, clean her house, tend to her garden and lawn, cook her meals, drive her if she was drunk, which was often, and sleep with her, which was daily. I even had my own bedroom, but I believe I only slept in it once. Anyway, she had a lot of money and had no problem wasting it. She did not work. She didn't need to. She would regularly spend more money on bar tabs than most people pay for rent. I've seen her spend $7,000 in one night. She bought a sailboat when we were together, but had no idea how to sail it. She just wanted to say she had a boat. We went on ski trips to Aspen that cost $100,000 easily. She had some weird fetishes she definitely picked up from dating wealthy men and her ex-husband. I won't go into details, but one involved cocaine, which is an expensive item for a fetish. It's crazy how many of these rich people try to get out of paying for things. Makes you wonder if that's how they got wealthy in the first place. As for material things I've seen, I worked on a house that had a huge swimming pool with a 1/3 mile long lazy river. He also had a movie theater that sat about 20 and a $60,000 aquarium in his private bar. I have worked for wealthy people when I was much younger. What always tripped me out were the druggy ones, which were most of them. They're the ones who consume huge amounts of cocaine or meth with seemingly no effect on their appearance because they had doctors who made house calls and give them IV vitamins and regimens of meds to help them sleep. Straight up crackheads, but rich. I also worked for a wealthy photographer who was just a photographer for fun. He saw people as things and objects in a weird, messed up way. Actually, several people I worked for were like this. Another rich person I worked for was a film director in Portland. They had tables set up with sex toys and other tables set up with drugs. He had his friends over and a bunch of young male street kids over for entertainment. When I started working with unhoused communities, I found out stuff like this is quite common. Color me shocked to find out this film director donates a lot of money to shelters for homeless youth in the area. It's a very Epstein-y open secret. Lastly, the richest person I worked for is a very nice Russian guy. He was multiple yacht wealthy. He had security that you never saw, but were always there. This guy would leave envelopes of money around when me and other employees would clean his house. No matter how nice he was to me, I always felt like the money was his excuse. If we had touched it, he would consider it open season on us. Again, very nice, but also very scary. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more Reddit stories. Thank you. I babysat for an old money family as a teenager. They had a massive house that had passageways in the walls that the kids would use to play hide and seek. The basement also had a passageway to a weird underground cellar that had been bricked off for decades. One day, the dad, who was the coolest dude I've ever met, asked if I wanted to earn an extra $200. I said sure. He wants me to help him knock down this brick wall because he can't stand it and has to know what's behind it. We go down and knock this wall out, only to find that in the late 1800s, his family had slaves. Instead of setting them free when slavery was abolished, they put these 4 poor women in a cellar and walled them in. The smell when that wall came down was god-awful. Even 20 years later, we have no idea who they were other than they were women. They buried them in the old family cemetery at the back of the property, right next to the relatives who walled them in to die. I still visit the family, as I'm great friends with their kids, and always go back and put flowers on those women's graves. They have headstones that simply say, "In Memoriam," since we don't know their names. I used to give guitar lessons in a very rich area, and the company I worked for had a lot of celebrity clients. I saw in-home rivers, elevators, waterfalls, live-in chefs, 40-car garages, fully automated mansions that could change the season indoors, etc. The thing that stood out most to me was the boredom. One guy I became friends with had 17 off-road vehicles, a house bigger than his Lakers star neighbor, and his Chicago Bulls star neighbor for that matter, and traveled to different extreme game competitions every weekend. But when I came over for the lesson, he just wanted to talk about Nirvana, watch TV, learn Pearl Jam bass riffs, and go to shows. The second thing that stood out to me was that the ratio of cool people to screwed up people seemed relatively the same between the super rich and the normies. There was one guy who wanted lessons with his very young son to connect with him, but would only last 3 minutes every lesson before he had to take an important call or run off to an emergency board meeting. You could see the kid was just crushed. However, I also gave lessons to a family where the parents were two high-powered lawyers, one of whom is now running for Congress, and they were absolutely amazing to their kids. Always attentive, would drop calls from celeb clients to fix a tricycle wheel, would lovingly enforce homework rules, etc. Great people. The last thing that stood out as the one really obvious advantage to being rich was the people's physical appearance. By and large, they were almost all very good-looking people at any age. It's actually kind of incredible what the body can do when you're able to always feed it healthy food, exercise whenever you want in a variety of ways, and the lack of daily grinding mental stress. I'm not saying they didn't have stress or they didn't work hard, but most did not have that existential stress about what might happen if they got fired because they didn't work the extra Saturday, or the stress of a boss breathing down their neck when you're at a dead-end job just hoping for a living wage. And lastly, I don't believe any of these people were self-made. This type of wealth is not just achieved by working hard and climbing the corporate ladder using nothing but your bootstraps. This type of money is generational wealth with decades-long investment accounts from things set up by ancestors. I'm not saying they haven't worked hard, but turning $100 into $1,000 and turning $100 million into $110 million are two very different things, and the latter is inarguably easier from both a percentage and opportunity standpoint. I used to perform religious services for a multi-billionaire on weekends. I saw some interesting things for sure. One of my favorite frivolous spending I saw was when he wanted to lower the fan on the AC system without changing the temperature, and his staff told him the system can't do that. He thought for a moment, then said something like, "Make it so it can do that. Have it done by Monday." That was Saturday. You bet there was a new HVAC system in that 6-story building by Monday. It cost a few $100,000. There was a lot of other stuff, but that stood out for how casual it was. I dated the heir of a family worth billions. He had a black Amex that was paid off every month. He never knew who paid it or anything like that. He regularly planned vacations that cost $50,000 to $100,000, usually to super remote areas. Waking up every day with nobody expecting anything of you makes a person weird. He was a very kind person, but out of touch. Just a little off in a way, because he was raised by people who didn't have any responsibilities, and he has never and will never have any either. It's not his fault. That kind of wealth doesn't come with an instruction manual, and he could definitely have been worse off with how he used it. It's like the difference between playing house and running a household. Life is just a way to pass the time. No requirements, everything is handled. It felt weirdly performative to be around him. He tries to do something with his life. He genuinely doesn't need to, so it's all a bit of an act. But yeah, that's why it didn't work out. I could never leave my financial future in the hands of my partner, so I wasn't ever going to stop my own life progress. We just didn't want the same things in that sense. When I was in grad school, I was a live-in employee for a billionaire. I think she just needed someone around the house. There were no issues and we got along fine. The most absurd thing she did for me was when I was doing a study abroad for 6 weeks, and she chartered a flight for me, just me, on a private jet, as well as an allowance for me to buy as much as I could while I was in Tunisia and Spain for her, and to have couriers ship it to her. She doesn't like to travel. The other graduate students looked at me when I spent $38,000 on 2 champagne flutes. The experience was eye-opening. She was a major landowner and a huge activist in a place where it was not popular, East Texas. She would donate to things like wolf sanctuaries and make enormous contributions to statewide dog shelters. The best was Planned Parenthood. Every time some pro-life protester would call to bitch her out, she would say, "Donate $2,000 to Planned Parenthood. The checkbook is on top of the fridge. Every time they call, write another check for $2,000. Then she would go back to reading her Architectural Digest with her coffee or wine or whatever. Planned Parenthood got nearly $1 million from her. I took joy in writing the checks. My father was the private chef for a billionaire. He would travel with him on his private jet and make him anything he wanted. He was very good to my father and also to us, his family. That being said, one story always stood out. He wanted a smoothie. They had just arrived at one of his houses, and my dad hadn't been in that kitchen in quite a while. He couldn't find the blender and was told to go out and buy one, high-end of course, and make a smoothie. He does this, makes the smoothie, and the boss is happy. While cleaning, my father found 10 blenders in obscure spots, likely done by the cleaning crew. It really put things in perspective for me. This man had thousands of dollars worth of pristine high-end blenders I would never even entertain buying, and he couldn't care less. In college, I was a nanny for a wealthy family. Their primary residence was featured in several architecture magazines, and at one time was the most expensive house ever sold in their state. I was one of 3 nannies who rotated so that at least one of us was there 24/7. They had several housekeepers, a full-time chef, 2 drivers, security, and a live-in tutor to help with the kids' homework. They gave me a credit card with my name to use for anything the children wanted, no questions asked. Once we went to Michael's craft store and they spent $800 on random things they didn't really have interest in, so I did a test and never brought the shopping bags in from the car. They never noticed or asked where $800 of stuff was. I think the children were developing a spending addiction. They just wanted to spend money and the stuff never seemed to matter to them. The entire time I worked for them, I was driving an old car with no heat or AC, and sometimes the spending I observed made me sick. We took many trips all over Europe and throughout the US via private planes and stayed in villas. I never got a break, and 90% of the time, I ended up sharing either a room or bed with the children as they were afraid to sleep alone. It was exhausting. It sounds like a glamorous experience, but honestly, I cried myself to sleep so many nights. Seeing how having too much money destroyed this family's relationship with each other was sad. Most nights, it would be the mother, her 2 children, and then 4 to 5 staff members sitting at their dining table. They are literally paying people to spend time with them. The mother was incapable of being responsible for her children, so at 18, I was responsible for not only the children, but also their mother. They had no real friends, only people who tried to get invited on their vacations with them. The staff rotated constantly and ultimately ended up being the family for the children, not their parents. It was just so sad on so many different levels. After a certain point, I had to stop nannying and just remove myself from the situation as it became all too stressful and a toxic environment to be in. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more Reddit stories. See you in the next video.